Hello and welcome to Sterling Armory's YouTube channel. This is the Oakeshott Typology series. This is actually the last video in our Oakeshott. Is that too loud? This is the last video in our Oakeshott Typology, and it's been fun. And I'm sure we could talk about Oakeshott's studies and his works a lot more than just the videos we did here. I don't know if you can hear my dogs, but this is the last video we planned. So we've gone over the blade types. So if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen the Oakeshott Typology yet, please go back and go back to the very first episode in this series where we describe the Oakeshott Typology and what it is in general. And then we covered all the blade types, all the guard types, all the pommel types, and now we're on to the sword families. So for most part, books down here. For the most part, most of our stuff comes from his two books, the Sword and the Age of Chivalry, and Records of the Medieval Sword. For the pommels and the guards, most of that came out of Age of Chivalry. For the sword families, put that up. For the sword families, we are going right out. There we go. Right out of Records of the Medieval Sword. So basically what the sword families are is kind of the last thing. I don't know if it's the last thing. It's the last thing we're covering. I'm not sure when in his studies he came up with these. Originally, it was only a few, and then he added more to it. But these are basically general groups, general groups of historical blades that he noticed that have similar guard, pommel, grip, blade setups. So basically, if you see a sword that's similar to this in the museum, it kind of fits in a family of swords that are very much like that, either during a certain period of time, or from a certain arsenal, or from a certain region, and so on. So let's dive into it. I'm sharing a little differently today. Let's see if this works. Yeah, there we go. So I know it doesn't look as good, but that's okay. So we have, he labels the families alphabetically, so from A all the way to M. And apologies for, this might be a little bit of a boring video because we're going to walk through each of these. And this image is one I snapped on my phone right out of the book from Records of the Medieval Sword. But we're going to walk through each of these, and I'm kind of going to be reading from the book, and that might be a little boring for some of you guys. If so, apologies, but I did want to cover all of these just to be complete in covering the Oakeshott stuff. So, real quick, I do find that I'm not sure why he chose the families he did, because I believe, at least from my own studies, there's a lot more families than what we're seeing in this book. As a great example, Irish ringhilts. Where are they? There's a whole family of those, and they're not in here. So I don't know why he doesn't consider them a family of blades. But I mean, I would say they would fit in here as their own family, but we don't see them. So these are the families that he personally looked at. Maybe that's the reason why. Maybe, I mean, I would assume he saw some Irish ringhilts in his time. We just don't see them here. So real quick. So starting on the upper left. So that is family A. If you look at that, and apologies if that's a little blurry there. But upper left is family A. So what you're seeing in the images, by the way, is you're seeing a flat-on image or sketch of the profile of the blade or the hilt, and then you'll see the pommel, from either side. So there might be two different variations of the pommel. So if you look at A, there's flat wheel pommels and there's beveled wheel pommels. If you look at B, that pommel is very particular, and I think A is the only one that has two different pommel variations there. So, real quick, let's go into them. So, family A. So, this is his first group of families. So, these date around 950 to 1550. So, they span a pretty long time period. But they're far more popular from 1050 to about 1300. So, it has a short hilt with a disc or wheel-shaped pommel and a straight cross. And rather often thick in its earlier manifestation. So, the cross itself would be thick. So that's it. That's family A. That's a very common sword type. Usually the blades are what type? 10s, 11s, and 12s. maybe even 13s as well. So family B, just to the right there, family B is one that I actually make a lot of. So most of, not all these are type 14s, and some type 16s have that as well. They had a short life from 1280 to 1325. I don't know if that's actually true. He says that, but I have seen some that date outside of that, especially type 16s that have that handle type. But he says, by which I mean that between these dates that the majority representations in art are to be found. So I guess that makes sense. So his artwork. It's a very short hilt, very wide, flat wheel pommel with a very prominent central bus and fairly thin cross arch toward the blade. So that is family B. Okay. Next one down, family C. So he's saying nearly all of these are type 13A blades. So the big, wide, great swords from around 1100 to 1250. And he's saying after 1250, though, they are found to be everywhere in manuscript pictures and sculptures of all kind. But it's a long hilt with a very deep wheel pommel and a straight plain cross. So that is family C. Okay, jumping on to family D. So family D follows family C. It's very popular a little bit later, 1360 to 1410. So it's a long hilt with a deep wheel pommel, often recessed on the flats. So the central boss is kind of recessed. And the cross here is a distinctive feature in which it's straight, rather long, but then the ends bend down. So that is family D. So family D, if you have been following, I'm doing some studies, or did some studies up in Chicago. They have a very great example of that I'll be showing hopefully soon. I don't know if it'll air before this video, but I'll go through that at some point. But I have a great example of that family. Okay, family E. So moving on to family E. So we're almost across the top line there. So these swords, the same proportions of those of D. So they're either type 14s. I'm sorry, not type 4. They're either type 15s or type 16s or type 17s. Usually 15s or 17s. The pommel is made of a rather complicated truncated wedge. So that's that pommel that's very unique to a type 17. There's some on type 15s, but it's mostly type 17s. And it's broad. Its upper broad end, which is arched and I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Arched and filed into 6 or 4 scallops. So yes, it's a scent stopper pommel. That's what he's saying. I'm not sure why he described it so complicated. The grip is long, as is the cross, and the cross arches toward the blade. But it generally have a square but thin cross section with no tapering or widening as the prior type. Okay, so that is type E. He also calls that the Sempok type. So yeah, that's Sempok's, I believe, a type 17. Okay, moving on. Family F. So family F is another one of my favorites. We make a lot of those. So family F, he says here, ask anybody to describe or draw a medieval sword, and this is a family that most often will pop up. And that's true. So if you think back to the original Excalibur from the cartoons and all that stuff, it's family F. So the type or the Henry V, very famous blade over his grave in Westminster is also the same type. So it's a very, very popular, very common type. So it spans between 1410 and 1550. It's usually on a type 18 blade, but it can also be a 16 or even a 14. Actually, wait. I don't think it's a 14. Sorry. Saying something wrong. That was off my head, not reading. But there are many, excuse me, there are many splendid examples surviving, and many shown art. They have the shape of the cross. The hilt is short with the big wheel pommel. The cross is generally quite long in the flat ribbon-like section, and it widens out and has those little rolls on the ends. So that is family F. And apologies again. Me reading here isn't the most exciting thing, especially when I read wrong. Okay, on to the second line now, though. So family G. So family G is much in common with F. The short hilt with a heavy wheel pommel, but the cross in the version of family D. So it's basically a mixture of family F and family D. So it has that cross where it widens at the center narrows down, and then the ends flip up. So that is family G. So family H. So he says about family H, it's difficult to know where to place these in the chronological sequence, as there's not many survivors, at least not many found in great condition. So the hilt, the blade, let's see what he's saying. I'm trying to think. Sorry about this. One moment. He's talking more about the blade here, which is interesting because most of this is about the handle. Okay, here we go. The pommel is a flat disc, generally with a small circular recess in its center. The cross is long, a shapeless, that's funny, shapeless bar of metal, a round or square cross section. And he says he regrets, and this is why it took me a second to read this. He regrets that he has to write in a very dismissive way of the sword, but he thinks they're pretty dull, lifeless, and undistinguishable. So, for some reason, that he made a whole family based on that. Which this is the stuff when you read, it's quite funny to think about him writing this. Okay, on to the next one. Hopefully, it's a bit more distinguishable than family H. So, family I. So he says right away, he returned to a handsome family. Most of the survivors are in the Alexandria arsenal from Constantinople. So here's a family that is kind of tied to a specific region and an arsenal. It's also funny that family I, if you were to replace the pommel of family I there with the ring pommel, then that would be a family of Irish ringhouse, and that's exactly what they would look like. So it's funny, I think, that he doesn't cover that. If anybody knows why he doesn't cover that, by the way, let me know in the comments below there. So family I, where was I? So he says its form is quite unmistakable. The pommels are of bronze, wide, flat, which is pretty cool. This is one of the few families that have mixed metals in them. So the pommel is bronze. I should say mixed metals as a general note of the family. So pommels are bronze, wide, flat discs with a central boss. The grip is short, crosses very much like a narrow bow tie, flat in section, and it widens out on the ends. So that is family I. Okay, moving on from that, on to family J. So family J, this is, I believe, the first of the fishtails. Is that right? Yeah. Maybe the only fishtail family he has in there. Yeah, it is. So family J, saying this is a very distinctive family as well. Most are quite big weapons, although not so large as war swords. So the grips themselves are quite short, 4 inches or so, but the pommels are long and seem as if it were to grow out of the top of the grip. So he's saying that the pommel and grip intersection is very smooth and almost seamless, which is, neat. It's actually expected nowadays in modern sword design, right? Where was I? So these pommels are best described as a fishtail form and are in many ways like a truncated wedge of family E, except that the sides are concave. The crosses are short. They're usually circular in cross section, and they widen at the midpoint. And each arm has a wasted end that tips in a spherical knob. So these are very, very common blades. If you're ever at the Met, you'll see a whole collection of these blades. I think they have 5 or 6 of them, if not more. And then the Wallace collection has a version of this that is bronze. Or actually, I don't know if it's bronze or if it's gold gilded over iron. I'll have to go back and check that. But that is family J. So on to K. And K is another one, by the way, that you were just put a ring hilt on there. It would blend in with family I, and it would be part of the Irish family. So, but family K. So this one he's saying is a Danish style. So this is another style coming from another area. And he's saying the hilt is generally a hand and a half. The pommel is very flat wheel form with a prominent central boss, and the cross is the bow tie of family I. There are, what are you saying? There are a few examples, but it seems a definite family all the same. So again, this is another one of those, like, if you have a Danish family, like, did you just not like Irish people? I don't know what's going on. And again, I keep poking at the Irish, but there's other families that are not in here too. There's some Scottish hilts that all fall kind of within the same look, that have those lobed, upswept guards. Not quite the later claymores. Although, wouldn't the claymore itself be a family in this, or is that a later time period? It could be a later time period than what he covers. But certainly the arming swords that have the V-shaped lobed guards, that should also be a family in here, I would think. Who knows? Okay, where was I? So, tangent. Okay, so that was K. Let's go on to L. So family L. This is another Danish variant. He does like the Danish. Is Oakeshott Danish? Is he half Danish? I don't know. I'm curious about that. But probably not. But just guess. So as far as he can ascertain, this is almost exclusively Danish. Long gripped war sword, the second half of the 15th century. So the pommel is a small pear shape. The grip is extremely long, 14 or 12 to 14 inches. Yeah, that is extremely long. It has 4 or 5 transverse ridges, intervals from top to bottom. So he's saying there's grooves or wraps around the grip along the grip. Across is short, flat section with a wider dimension in the same plane as the blade. Yeah, that makes sense. And then it strongly arches toward the point of the sword. So yeah, it's your classic Danish. So if you've seen any Danish two-handers that are Type 18s that have that ricasso that's narrowed, that's that type of family. So in the last one he covers here, which I would think there's more in this category as well. So he's saying Type M or Family M as one family, but there's multiple versions of this one that would be families within themselves, I would think, because there's some of these that have fishtails, there's some that have scent stoppers, there are some that have just different types of pommels, but then have the same grip and the same guard. But let's see what he says. So Family M, this is the last of the families. So it's perhaps the most common swords of the northern parts of Europe in the second half of the 15th century and the first quarter of the 16th century. The pommel is a wheel form, or perhaps it's better described as being a thick disc with a raised rim. Just inset. So the face of the pommel has an inset. It's hollowed out. The grip is long, formed into distinct parts. So you have a wasp waist grip. And then the cross itself is typically a recurved S, as you see in the image there. So that is Family M. So those are all the families that he categorizes in, again, swords, or the records of the medieval sword. I apologize again. I cannot talk today. So that concludes our description and discussion of the Oakeshott Typology. So if you've been following all these videos, thanks for following along. If you're still with us, thanks for joining us. And I hope this helped you out in either learning what the Oakeshott Typology is, or maybe gave you some more insight into it, or maybe you learned something you didn't know before. I know I have, because going back through, I always forget. There's a lot of information in these books. And one thing, again, to keep in mind, another reason why I don't keep some of this in my memory, and this is a discussion I was having with the curator in Chicago, but not just him, but many curators, is they don't typically use the Oakeshott Typology as a, well, definitely not as a rule, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a bit, but they generally don't use it because it can cause confusion. And the point is when people were making swords back then, they weren't making blades it needs to be a type this or a type that. That's not how it worked. So they tend not to use it. Now, for us in the industry, we use it a lot because it's very easy. It's very convenient. So the typology really allows us to describe a sword that we're making or that we're talking about and put it in a classification pretty quickly. But again, even Oakeshott himself will say it's not a rule. So many blades don't fit within iron guards and pommels and grips and families even. Don't fit within everything he described. There's a lot of wiggle room, and there's a lot of things that go from in between different types. So keep that in mind. But yeah, overall, it's very helpful. And I think a large majority of people selling blades, making blades, or the human community itself is typically well versed in different Oakeshott Typology blades or types. So again, we use it just as an easier way to talk about swords. so that is that. Thanks for joining us again. And although the Oakeshott series is coming to an end here, we do have other series coming up. We also might have a vlog coming out because we're doing some different stuff as well. But keep an eye on our channel. Our channel. I really can't talk tonight. Keep an eye on our channel and keep an eye on our Sword Talk, but that still comes out as often as we can get it out. And we will hopefully see you guys at events coming up, either human tournaments or Ren fairs or medieval shows and the like. So thanks for joining us, and catch you next time.